It's known as Chemical Valley, a 25-kilometer area around Sarnia at the southern tip of Lake Huron. It's home to Ontario's largest concentration of petrochemical plants. It's also an area that thousands of people call home. Is it safe for them to live there? Mary Baxter staffs our Southwest Ontario hub and has been working on a four-part series of articles exploring that very question. And she joins us now from our studio at Western University in London for more. Mary, it's good to see you again. I'm going to operate from the assumption that not everyone knows about Chemical Valley, so why don't we just start with your giving us some of the 411 on that?
Okay, Chemical Valley is a place where chemicals are produced, actually. It's been in that area of the province, which is, as you mentioned, it's right at the bottom of Lake Huron, and it tends to follow along the side of the St. Clair River, which connects Lake Huron to Lake St. Clair. And the industry, basically, it started really started to rev up during the Second World War because they needed to find an alternative for acquiring rubber for vehicles and that sort of thing. And so they started making synthetic rubber there. And ever since then, it's just been continuing on and adding some other products. A lot of plastics are made there, for instance. But as you also mentioned in the introduction, it's home to, in Sarnia, there's about 72,000 people, and in St. Clair Township, which is just south of Sarnia, there's another 14,000 people. And then in between the two is First Nation Aamjiwnaang, and there's about 1,000 people who live there. So a good portion of Lambton County actually lives in that area too. So it's kind of a tension between residents and really, really big industry working in the same place.
Right. Now, we don't want to be inflammatory here, but the reality is your piece is, your four-part piece actually, series, is filled with stories that are occasionally scary. You want to let us in on one or two of them?
Sure. One of the ones that I was actually thinking about that really touched me was it happened in 2013, and it happened in winter, actually around this time, and it happened at Aamjiwnaang. Basically, what happened, it was late in the morning, and the teachers or the staff at a local daycare and children there started to smell a really odd smell. And the staff realized they shut the doors and they shut the windows and they turned off the heating just in case, because this First Nation is tucked right in the middle of all of this industry. And it was a little while after that one of the companies nearby sounded an alarm about an escape of gas, and they weren't sure what it was. And they issued an order for people to shelter in place. But that order didn't reach the daycare, and it didn't reach the residents of Aamjiwnaang. Although they had sent it out to people living nearby in St. Clair Township, they'd failed to notify these other residents. And by the time they realized their mistake, they'd actually lifted the shelter-in-place warning, and the warning actually came to the daycare staff, about a half an hour or so after that. The gas, fortunately, it turned out to be harmless, something that they add into other gases that don't have a smell in order to alert people that the gas is leaking or something like that. But it could have been just a real tragedy.
Sure. When did that one happen, Mary?
That happened in 2013. Okay,
let me take you way back then. I want to go back to 1951 because there was a major accident that happened in Chemical Valley back then that did sort of highlight the importance of emergency management. Tell us about that one.
Well, that one was, the plant's closed now. It was the polymer plant. And what happened was that there was a big explosion. I can't remember what kind of gas it was, but it was something that produced a really thick black smoke, and people heard it. They could hear it from like 100 miles away or 100 kilometers away. They heard it in London, for instance, and I think they heard it in Detroit. And for some people, when they heard it, it was, let's get out of here. Let's just get as far away from Sarnia as we can. So there's wide-scale panic that way. But there was also a lot of people who were really curious about what was going on. So instead of running away, they actually went to go and see the big fire. But the problem was that there were so many people doing that and so many people on the roads trying to flee that the emergency crews couldn't get in there to try to fight the fire. So after that, once they got everything under control, there was recognition that they really had to look at some way on how to get information out into the community and to control the emergency response in a much better way.
So there were lessons learned as a result of that, going all the way back to the 1950s.
Yeah, actually, it was pretty well immediate. What happened was members of industry approached representatives at the city to talk about it and to establish committees.
And are there resources in place today in the case of a serious accident?
Well, huge number of resources. Plants, for instance, often have their own emergency personnel to fight incidents and specialize in the types of accidents that can happen in the plants. There's a whole network of sirens that are through the valley. So it's not just in Sarnia, but in St. Clair Township, in Aamjiwnaang, and in Point Edward. And then they actually test them, would you believe, once a week on Mondays at 12:30. They have a special radio frequency that is shared by emergency responders and industry that they test every day. And they even have things like trailers to evacuate people if they need to from the city or from a neighborhood. And they also do, like once a year, they'll do a simulation, an emergency simulation to just see what they need to hone in terms of an emergency response. So in some ways, the system is very rigorous. Another area that they try to reach out to people, they used to do, remember how we used to have those emergency alerts on television? And
Sure.
sometimes we still do. Well, they have shifted from that approach to things like MyCNN, which is, I think they call it kind of like a push network, so people can sign up to it and they can receive the mandatory emergency alerts, and they can receive them via email or via telephone or via text, whatever way or preference they have, they can receive it.
Are you able to gauge, Mary, whether, people who live in the area, how content they are to sort of share the neighborhood with all of these petrochemical plants?
Well, certainly, I think when we live outside of an area like that, we look at those plants and they're so intimidating. I mean, you see smoke coming up, and it's actually steam that's being I can't say burnt off, but it's steam released. And there's just all these pipes and tubes and all these sorts of things, and it's quite intimidating to see. But when you live there, you get used to these things, and a lot of people actually have faith in the emergency systems that have worked out and in the technologies and in how much things have advanced. And they also see, I mean, these are major employers. Together, they're the biggest industry in the area, and so a lot of people have good lives because of these plants as well. So they tend to be a lot of people tend to be fairly forgiving who live there about the plants and some of the odors that they might smell, that sort of thing. But then, of course, there's lots of others who are really concerned and look to things and worries about what is it doing to their health.
Right, and in fact, one of your pieces, you focus on a couple of activists who are, in their view, trying to make things better there. What are they up to?
Sure. Ada Lockridge is a member of Aamjiwnaang First Nation, and she's been working on trying to get better controls in place in terms of air emissions and spills. And she's been working with she started off working, actually helped to found the Environment Committee for her community, and they did a lot of things to raise awareness. She's worked on, for instance, a survey of health in the community, and another one that looked at birth rates in Omnijong. And what she found out with that, she and her study partners, was that for every 2 girls that were being born, only 1 boy was being born. And so they've raised she's raised a lot of awareness about some of the potential health issues there, and also about the amount of chemicals that are being released into the air. And so she's been focused primarily in that area, but as Ada always mentions, what happens in one place can happen in other places as well. Chris Lee, her focus has been more on the river and working on cleanups there, and she's part of a binational committee that's overseeing that cleanup, and she's been at that work since the late 1980s. There was a big release of or spill of chemicals into the river that was known at the time as the blob. And she actually saw it when it was first discovered. Her daughter was having a birthday party and they wanted to go swimming. And she saw all of the divers and the bright orange balloons that was circling the area just outside of their family cottage that it was at that time.
That was not a good day to go swimming.
No. So she's worked hard on that, she and her other committees, in trying to clean up the river. They've certainly had some successes. They've remediated some of the areas where there's been contamination, but there's still more that exists in the river. They've helped to clean up the waters enough that we're starting to see a return of some of the wildlife to the area. They've done things like changed the seawalls from something that's like this really hard steel that nothing can kind of live on to something that's more graded or stepped so that fish can spawn there. And so there's been some good success that way. Chris has also been involved in helping to, on a committee that's involved in helping to establish new standards for emissions from the industry as well.
Great. Mary, we invite everybody to check out your 4-part series. It's on our website, tvo.org. And thanks for coming on the TV channel tonight to share your views on your very good series. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.